And I will do my best to keep us on track because I think keeping it to an hour is fair for people, especially the four of you. And we'll just do our best to stay as tight as possible.
Okay, I'm gonna, should I go ahead and hit broadcast? I'm gonna disappear myself. And then
broadcast, and then what I'm gonna do is come off of the share screen and then go back to it, Modesto, to the images, okay?
Okay.
So I'll come off it and then we'll do a hello, la, la, la.
Great. Yeah, I got my drink ready. Oh, we're live.
We're live. We'll give it like a minute.
I'm going to take a screenshot so everybody smile. All right, got it. Oh, that was good. Oh, I don't have my glasses. Great.
You have your glasses. Get your glasses.
I'm going to run very quickly to get my glasses.
Or get your glasses. Great, so I think we're going to get started. Modesto will be back in just a moment. My name is Kelly Seacat, and I'm the director of the LucasArts program at Montalvo Arts Center. It's a treat to have you all with us today, and it's a treat to be here. I'm joined by my colleague, Nathan Sinan, who is, you cannot see him. He is taking care of us. He's going to make sure we stay on track. I like that security. Today is the third in a series of conversations from our Lonesome exhibition. It's an exhibition that Montalvo began organizing over a year ago as we took on the theme of loneliness and thinking about loneliness and social isolation as an epidemic internationally around the world, and how an art center, public park could become a space to sort of to counteract some of that loneliness and create environments where people could come together. And it was our intention in June of 2020 that we would launch a public art program, expanding that conversation out throughout the Bay Area. It was an exhibition that was inspired by the work of curatorial collaborative vignettes, who did the Alone project in Seattle in 2018. So they were very fundamental in helping us get organized. And as we moved into this moment of pivot in COVID, we had some changes to the exhibition, and I turned to an artist I knew. I wanted somebody who worked in multiple disciplines, somebody who could work with our partners at the San Jose Quilts and Textile Museum, somebody who could respond to this moment, and somebody who might be willing to just dive in with me. And Modesto Covarrubias was ready. School had just quit. He wasn't sure how he was going to use this time in quarantine. And I said, how about, coming up with a dozen artworks in the next 3 days? And we maybe had a little bit longer than that, but we did a major pivot together, and it's been nice to have you in my life during this time. So thank you.
Thank you.
So today's conversation will be with Modesto, and I've asked all of our artists as we've gone through these conversations to invite people whom they'd like to be in conversation with. And so Modesto gave me the names of Constance Lewis, Chris Everts, and Ernest Jolly as 3 people he really wanted to talk to and see how they were handling this moment, this pivot, and what we're doing. So I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then we're going to just start looking at practice and get back to a conversation. Nathan and I want you to know if you have questions along the way, you can put them into the chat, and we will have time for questions towards the end of the hour. So Modesto Covarrubias is an artist who investigates physical, psychological, and emotional connection to environments in his work. His interdisciplinary practice employs a broad range of media, including drawing, photography, installation, printmaking, textiles, and performance. He's an adjunct professor at the California College of the Arts in San Francisco, and his practice includes Rococo, an ongoing collaboration with fellow CCA Associate Professor Casey Rosenberg. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Modesto is joined today by Ernest Jolly, an artist and curator, co-founder of the Idora Park Project Space in Oakland, a creative platform for the experimentation. He's also an installation artist who works and investigates the human condition, including migration, environmental degradation, and place. Within his practice, Jolly employs the built environment, sound, and objects to explore such themes. Chris Evans is an Oakland-based interdisciplinary artist trained in music and dance. Her practice focuses on how we might cultivate listening, listening to the invisible, listening for the forgotten, listening to what silence holds, listening with our ears, our eyes, our bodies. Her work invites us to listen to the unknown and to let the unknown seep into our ears, every pore before we colonize it with our minds and our words. She's a co-founder of Idora Park Project Space with Ernest Jolly and directs Reconstruction Study Project. As a member of the House Full of Black Women Collective and a Simple Collective. And then we have Constance Lewis, who's with us. Constance is a curator, gallerist, art advisor, artist, and the principal of Opal Arts. Constance coming to us today from Louisiana, correct?
Well, I'm in Houston, but Louisiana is also.
Constance coming today from Houston. She's studied photographic conservation at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France and honed her curatorial skills working with multiple exhibitions and collections, including André Cortez, Lee Friedlander, and the At Work project. Soon after earning her degree in photography from San Francisco Art Institute, she founded Opal Gallery, an artist collective that exhibited an international selection of artists. So I think all of our panelists today have found themselves stopped in their tracks and needing to pivot. And for Modesto, his project with Lonesome was really about how are we coping? Modesto, would you like to talk a little bit about how you came up with the work that you shared with us for Lonesome?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you again, Kelly, for all this, and Nathan for being back there controlling all this. And I want to thank Chris and Connie and Ernest for joining us today as well. I couldn't have picked a better group to converse with. And the work, I mean, at first, so the billboard that you're showing was the initial work that was kind of thought through. And the billboard and Bus Shelter Works are a reaction to kind of stopping myself and understanding what's supporting me during this time. You know, I had been making work for another project involving using or creating plastic yarn and then knitting it into lengths to put together into a larger piece. So that's the background image in all of these. And this activity was sustaining my creative side. So, and I thought, well, what's getting me through this, right? What's sustaining me through that? And stepping back and thinking about it, my visual making is informed by all the other senses, especially the auditory. And my studio is often filled with podcasts or music in the background. And music inspires in so many ways. And it occurred to me, the context of certain lyrics at various times in my life have sustained me through many different experiences, both good and bad, but especially while making. And sort of that's sort of the meat of the project. And it's often at the heart of what I do, right? With the meaning of meaning, basically. And then the other thing I do is investigate how a space is often transformed through experience and vice versa. That's where the knitting chair comes in. I've utilized this material, this method, if you will, in various projects, and Chris and Ernest can speak to that. They offered a platform where I did something using the yarn and taking on a space as well. And it's the accumulation of the material and the amalgamation with the surroundings that often creates a situation of a type of distancing. We want to touch the material, but we're bound by the social construction of what the art as object is, and we respect the idea of its presence as an art object, as a sculptural thing, right? So the process and the results of knitting can often be a psychological, and physiological representation of time, and this accumulation can evoke all types of meaning and inference. So, and then when the niche space in the entry foyer at the San Jose Museum of Quilts and Textiles was being considered, I was thrilled with being able to kind of bring this out in this massing of this acrylic yarn again, and with the guidance and assistance of the curator, Amy DiPlacido, it exists now there in that space. It's inviting and menacing, and the piece is visible, yet out of reach. And to me, that sort of invokes our current situation on many levels as well. So.
Modesto, remind me the kind of date by which we put this in. Were we in early June?
Well, it was originally supposed to be up by June 1st. And then that was the time when when we were going from a lockdown, the shelter in place, to sort of things being closed down because of protests, right? We had all the reaction to what was happening with police brutality and the lack of social justice in this country, and people were reacting to that. And so streets were closed down and we had to postpone the installation of this. So we put it off for a few days. So it was very early June. So it's been up since early June, and I think it's scheduled to stay up through September.
That's my understanding as well. So let's hope that the museum will open its doors and people will be able to get a little closer. But it's been very poetically placed at the entry. You can see it as you walk by, but you cannot get close to this work. Yeah. And that sort of quilting or crocheting and crocheting and crocheting and having that build up over time just feels incredibly poetic to this moment.
Yeah.
I love this piece.
Me too.
Great. I'm going to move on to you, Constance, and just have you talk a little bit about the work you do, your practice, and then some places where you've been halted along the way.
Great, and thank you for this conversation. I'm really excited to be here and to talk with a group of artists as a curator and as an artist. Modesto and I have been working together since we were classmates at the Art Institute, and so I come from a creative community environment, a collaborative environment, a critical environment as an art student. And so I carried that into my curatorial work. This project is one that I worked on in Louisiana with the Louisiana State Museum. And what we're looking at, it was a former storage room in a 300-year-old museum, the Cabildo, in Jackson Square, New Orleans. If you've been there, you've probably seen it. Next to the church. And it was a room that the director of the museum was interested in bringing new audiences to the museum. And so with my collaborator, Dr. Pella McDaniels, who is a curator of the African American Archive at Emory University in Atlanta, we came up with an idea and a way to invite contemporary artists in to evaluate and to bring some of the archive out and to use them as points of departure for a unique work. So what we're looking at now is an opportunity for, oops, is it gone? Is an opportunity for me to bring an artist from San Francisco to New Orleans. Artist Ben Don, who is a photographer, he works in alternative processes, he had family in Louisiana. And so what he was interested in doing is exploring the Vietnamese community in New Orleans. And so he was able to come. He did some research, some field work. He got to know some of the community, some of his family members, and he did this installation piece around that. So I just lost the screen.
Okay.
I don't see my screen right now, so let's see.
You tell me when you're ready to move on. Ben has also been a juror for us at Montalvo. So a great artist to bring into the fold. Thank you. You there, Constance?
Actually, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I am, for some reason, let's see. I am not able to, I just lost my screen. I'm having some time.
Well, we can hear you and see you. So I'm going to go on to the next image, which is an image of the storefront gallery that you have. Opal Gallery.
So Opal Gallery was created as an artist collective. It was my first gallery that I was able to open and bring artists, emerging artists, artists who were local, artists who were from other parts of the country to Atlanta. So Opal Gallery existed in Atlanta. It was meant to be a collective. So what you're looking at is a storefront. It is a cube. It is 365 square feet. So it was always open. So at night, the lights were on, the installations were always available to passerbys and to people who could see the work. So it was meant to be sort of more than a gallery, more than four walls. It was meant to be a place where people could come and talk about work and learn and have art accessible to them. So again, thinking about how to bring communities together was sort of the impetus for Opal Gallery.
That's great. I'm going to go on to the next image. Can you see the images now?
I can't, barely, it's very
The
small.
Gus Bennett image.
So artist Gus Bennett is another project that I'm working on in New Orleans. It is, Gus Bennett is a notable photographer in New Orleans. After Hurricane Katrina, he started a project called the New Orleans People Project, where he photographed residents, people who had lost their archives, their photographs, their family photos after Hurricane Katrina. Gus has done extensive work. He's documented very famous New Orleanians. He's documented his neighbors. And so this project was meant to be at the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation Museum. This was also another project that I was working with Pella McDaniel. So after this project was envisioned, and in the interim during COVID, Pella McDaniel, my curator, passed away, unfortunately. And so the shift now is thinking about how to bring these projects to fruition alone without my collaborator, and also thinking about ways now to bring these projects to a broader audience, which is what we've been talking about trying to do. So this is a project that's sort of right now it's being shifted. We're thinking about ways as a photography exhibit now to project it, to bring it outside of museum walls. And possibly in other communities.
And then you have one other project that also was halted.
Right, and so this project actually, and trying to think about silver linings that have come out of the pandemic, is this project. This was also a project that it was part of this dialogue series that, again, we were bringing institutions out into the open, broadening the conversation, broadening communities. Is we were able to work with the Jazz and Heritage Foundation Archive. The Jazz and Heritage Foundation in New Orleans, for those of you who don't know, who aren't from New Orleans, they sponsor the Jazz Festival, which is widely known. Many of us have enjoyed it. I have. And for 50 years, it's been a very important part of New Orleans culture. So what they do year long is that they support a lot of the cultural institutions in New Orleans. And what we're looking at now is these are two photographs from the Jazz and Heritage Foundation archive. They are the Black Masking Indians of New Orleans, and they're often seen during Mardi Gras season. They are also part of the rituals in New Orleans, such as rituals for funerals and deaths, births, and weddings. And now with COVID and distancing, they're not able to practice. And so what we're trying to do with an artist in Atlanta, his name is Fahamu Peku. Fahamu Peku is an artist who explores representations of Black masculinity, was interested in visiting these archives and finding ways to sort of bring the funeral traditions in New Orleans that cannot happen now into the world, and to have these kinds of grieving opportunities for people who have passed, and also bring the culture of New Orleans out into a broader audience.
Thanks, Constance. Ernest, we're going to go on to your work.
Okay.
I'm excited to share your work with people today. This piece is entitled Fetish.
Yep. So also I want to express a thank you for inviting me to participate in this. And like you were saying earlier, Kelly, Modesto is a very great artist with this ability to pivot and inspire people to go into their own practice based on his work. The three images that I'm going to show you are object related, then my transition into kinetic art, and finally, my installation projects. The first piece that you're looking at is Fetish, and it's based on the Nkisi in Kanda in the Congo. And what I was trying to find as an African-American artist whose all of my formal education has been centered on Western tradition is to kind of find a tradition that predates African-American involvement in the United States and goes back to the continent. So if you study the Nkanda, you'll see that there's this rich culture of African work that these Nkanda are basically objects that sit in the center of the community, and you would go to an advisor and tell them your problem, and then they would give you a prayer, and then also these nails. The nail you would drive into the object, and the more nails that these objects would have, the more powerful that they would become. And it's my particular piece is a sideways punching bag, because coming back to the United States and my exploration of Black identity, a lot of for me, a lot of it is centered on my relationship with my dad. My dad was an avid boxer fan. And Jack Johnson was one of the first African-American world champion boxers. And his winning the world championship is actually what inspired Jack London to call for the Great White Hope. And so I'm combining these ideas and images into object. We can go to the next slide. So after exploring those ideas of the visual projection or idea of identity, in particular Black male identity, I went on to kind of think about my own personal relationship in the United States. And as a child, one of my favorite objects was a pinwheel. And so as I become more of a crafter, I just came to this reality that I can make hundreds of pinwheels, and that is my joy. So this wall that you're looking at is about an 8-foot wide, 4-foot tall plexiglass wall in a corner, and it's got several pinwheels that there's a fan that the viewer stands behind, and it's activated. These pinwheels are activated by this fan. So it's very elementary in terms of its construction and how the pinwheels operate. But when you're in front of it, it's pretty enveloping and I think magical, which is what I was trying to get back to, the magic of childhood and my just joy of like pinwheels, simple objects. And we'll go to the third
The name of this work is Interstellar.
That's correct. It's Interstellar. And I used to spend, Chris can attest to this, I spent hours and hours just laying in my yard looking up at the sky. That was my pastime. And so just imagining where I could go and be. And not to say that my childhood was traumatic. I actually had a very lovely childhood. But just that imagination was to look up into the sky.
And
So we, I'm sorry.
standing in front of this work, you feel the wind and see
Yes.
the station.
Yeah, so there was actually the fan that was in the ceiling was pretty heavy duty, so you would get this breeze that would be at your back.
That's great.
Yeah.
The next one.
So then Labor Party is, this image is taken from that installation. And you can see the little black objects are, again, the use of the speed bag. And so what I'm investigating in this piece is both objects in space. You're able to navigate this. The viewer is able to walk around it. Politically, you know, this was done in 07, 08. We were in this moment we had a Democrat as president, but in my opinion, we still weren't addressing the issues of labor. And so this is a play on words with the Labor Party, the black bodies that are navigating a dance floor. So the disco ball was that reference to dance and good times, but it was also Isabel Wilkerson had written The Warmth of Other Suns, and it was about the migration of African Americans from the South, North and West. And it was something that played in my mind because my mother's family is actually a family that existed in Ohio for multiple generations before this great migration. And I went to a talk with Isabel Wilkerson, and she felt that the numbers that were present in the North before the great migration were not significant enough for her to do too much study on it. So this is a platform in which I began to investigate my family who left the labor in Virginia and migrated to Ohio in the mid 1800s. And also the materials are very, very common materials. The wheelbarrow that you see in the foreground is made out of plexiglass. I work in museums and I use a lot of recycled materials from the end of exhibitions to create my work. The punching bags, they're leather. I studied couture before I went into fine art. And so this is like an homage to me using those skill sets to build objects also.
That's great.
Yeah, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernest. So Chris, we go on to you. And what we're going to see, the first two slides are from the Reconstruction performance ritual.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. And thank you, Modesto. And it's really great to be here with Constance and Ernest. This Reconstruction study project started as a conversation with David Boyce, who you see playing a soprano saxophone in the picture here. It was 2015, and it was the 150th anniversary of the end of the Civil War. And there was no discussion about Reconstruction.
Can you come a little closer to your mic, Chris?
Sorry, is that better?
That's okay. Yeah.
We were talking in 2015, and I was just so surprised to see that there was nothing about Reconstruction in the news. There were no shows. There was not much discussion at all. And so I was talking to David and saying that I wanted to do something around Reconstruction. And he was really excited about it and had a family story that he shared with me. And it was quite an incredible story. I won't tell it, but it became the seed of our first several studies, which were performances we did more in traditional theaters as part of festivals, specifically the Black Choreographers Festival. the the Reconstruction Study project was, I mean, there are the questions of Reconstruction around what happens to to newly freed Black people in the U.S. And there were a whole host of questions around integration into the economy, integration into the political system, integration into communities, that were answered in various ways. And in many cases, structures of oppression were recreated. And so I was really interested in the effect on the inner landscapes of Black people and what resources we had through our family stories, through our own interrogation of our identities, and to create and to find some sort of liberation from the systems that seem to just be recreated in order to contain and control Black bodies. So the studies there were 5 or 6 studies that I did with various collaborators. Beebe, who you saw in the first picture and in this picture as well, came into the first dance performance piece that we did. And he's a wonderful dancer and choreographer. And we began this collaboration. He's actually from Congo and was beginning to explore these questions of becoming a Black person in the U.S. So the series culminated with a site-specific ritual performance at Idora Park Project Space, and the 2 images that you've just seen are in that space, and they were the first kind of big public event that we had in the space. And I was really interested in thinking about the site, thinking about where we were, thinking about the history of the neighborhood, thinking about what it meant to acknowledge the indigeneity, the indigenous people of a place, and also to inhabit places that you're not necessarily indigenous to. I was also thinking about the question of how Black or Africans who were brought over to be slaves transplanted their indigeneity. So this was an epic performance. We had a 3-part performance that started in this gallery space, which is a beautiful space that Ernest has created, including these incredible floors. And it was a 3-hour durational piece that cycled through a series of movements, and people could come and go as they pleased. And then we transitioned into a second space in the project space that was a more formal performance, kind of stage performance. And then we took a procession around the neighborhood, and then we came back and we ate food together and talked. And it's really important. It was really important for me, both for it to be a site-specific piece and for there to be collaboration that went in all directions. So among the artists, among the food artists, we brought in Thuy Tran, who helped curate the food. Josh Hoyt from the American Indian Resource Center brought some of his students, and they made indigenous drinks and talked about their processes of doing that. And then a very mixed community of people were able to start to engage some of these questions of what does Reconstruction mean in this country? So that was, there's much more. And there was one Reconstruction study piece that was inspired by Modesto, where I knitted for 10 hours. It's sort of amazing to see how influential Modesto has been in the trajectory of my development. So anyway, that's another issue. So the last piece is this was an installation at the Berkeley Art Center that was part of a exhibition curated by Rhiannon Evans McFadgen, and it was called Bodies on the Line. And there were three African-American artists with very different practices and approaches who were the artists in the exhibition. This project is called Cipher, and I am still ciphering what it means. But I was, as a result, and sort of as a continuation of the Reconstruction Study project, I wanted to start looking at my white ancestry and what that meant in the context of this country and the history. And so I think there's so much coded language and concepts in that history, and that was sort of the beginning of that. So there was the installation, then I did a performance in the installation, which had a sound component, and then I did a performance component. And these are all artifacts from the past Reconstruction Study project. So the knitting in the front is from the piece that I just mentioned, and the other pieces are elements that I used.
It's incredible. We'll come back to this. So before we end, I'd like Ernest and Chris to just talk a little bit about the Idora Park projects. This is a space you've created, and as I understand, it's been open for just 1 year. You've clearly done some incredible work in it so far. And I want to understand where you are at the moment and how you're thinking about it.
Chris, you go first.
I was going to say you go first. I think, so what you're seeing is the gallery part of the space, and there's a dance studio that is behind this room. And we also have a Pilates studio where I'm sitting now, where I teach Pilates. I think I'm really reflecting. I'm not sure what is supposed to be next. And Ernest and I have been having a lot of conversations about, can we think outside of the box, and what does our community need? You know, what could this space be? I think there's been a lot of discussion around healing and the need for people to deeply heal in this moment, and thinking about how the space might serve that need.
Yep. So just for the bones of the place, Chris and I had an opportunity to move into this building, and myself as an installation artist, I find I prefer to do installation artists. It's not commercially viable. This space came up, and we can go into details later about how that happened. But I was like, wouldn't it be great if we had a space where it was low stakes? We live in the building, and so our costs are all contained. And so we don't have to rely on the success, commercial success of the exhibitions. So we can invite artists in to explore. And that's really what the space is about: exploring visually, performatively, and even food as an example. We did close down with the pandemic coming on, but it's given us an opportunity, or it's given me an opportunity, to build out and refine the space.
It's really incredible. I can't wait to come up and visit. I see some of Modesto's works here in the image we're looking at. Yeah. He's got these, it's Rococo's work, mm-hmm. Casey Rosenberg, and these are the Forgiveness Towers.
Right. Yeah. Well, the Forgiveness kind of bled into these. These are actually considered talk of the town now. And I love how they work with Matt and Nicole's work there. Nicole's the painter with those beautiful, beautiful images. And then Matthew's earlier works, which are those sort of, I call them giant candies on the wall. They're just exquisite. So, and again, I know Ernest is probably sick of me hearing me say this, but those floors,
The floor.
these are the best floors ever for an art space.
Words on this project.
Well, and they're so they're soft, like to dance on them. They just hold you in a really lovely way. In addition to being incredibly beautiful.
And they bounce light in such an amazing way for art. Seriously, it's people should take note. It's really amazing. So,
Thank you.
So I'm going to bring us all back on the screen together. Thank you for sharing your work. It's important that people know what you're doing and where you are. And, you know, for this conversation, Modesto had said, I really, you know, working on this play of song titles, song lyrics, said, I think we should title it What's Going On. And if I could sing, I'd sing a little for you. You'd prefer I didn't. What's going on? I mean, how are we taking this moment? And I think your work, Constance, and with the Idora Park Project, you're both so embedded in community, and it's really what's happening at Montalvo. We are an anchor for our community in many ways, but we also have a really extended community of artists across the country. And how can we continue to hold space for conversations? And I feel like that's some of what this is for me. And I'm just thinking about that pivot. Same with you, Modesto, and thinking about your own academic work and where you are and how you all are pivoting in this moment. And we touched on it, each one of you.
I love that Chris spoke of the reconstruction, because I think we're in that another sort of reconstruction right now on so many different levels. So this is the next reconstruction of not just our country. I mean, it's really sort of this grander moment across the world, but specifically within our own communities. How are we going to move forward with this? Because it is sort of this interesting time to be reflective, but also be actionable. So I'm interested in hearing how you're all dealing. Who wants to go?
Well, I'm working. I work at a museum in addition to the Idora project, and you know, it's a transition. I think where I'm at is just relooking or reevaluating for Idora project the last year, and at the museum the last 10 years. We're actually coming. Our show is going to be a time capsule, and so in addition to the objects that are going into the space, I'm literally pulling the forms, the mannequins, the structures, the mounts, and everything from the exhibitions. And so it's given me this opportunity to reflect and then to refine what happened before and inform it with this current environment, both the pandemic and the social justice call. And it's actually been really fruitful for me. And because I don't, yeah, I'll leave it at that and open it to other folks.
Yeah, and maybe as you think of a response, both Constance and Chris, you know, how is this isolation kind of supporting and detracting? What are the pros and cons of this moment? I think, you know, if we think about this as kind of a reconstruction of the soul of the country even, and who we are as Americans, all of your work, you know, really dives into that.
Well, I think for me, just to my projects had taken such a shift, so much had changed. I lost my collaborator. The work that I had intended on installing inside museums, now thinking about new ways for it to be accessible, right? To be able to bring the work outside of museums. And I think that the thing that is exciting to me is what this has shown me is the power in enlarging community and bringing community together on a larger scale. And these kinds of opportunities, these conversations, the virtual gatherings that we have now available are something that I never really thought about, honestly. I never had access to. I was never looking in that direction. So for me, this has been eye-opening. It's exciting. my projects that were sort of designed to bring audiences to museums. Now the shift is at bringing museums out into the community, out into the world. So that terrified me initially. And now it's exciting. I think I'm kind of on this, or sort of in this place of knowing that there's so much opportunity with this, and the idea of collaborating and voices that can be, and just having conversations that need to be had right now.
Yeah, I think this has been an important moment because it allows a kind of remembering and a kind of delving back into history, and the time to digest and reflect on it. I was just thinking about the image in that you had in your presentation, Connie, of the Black Indians in New Orleans, and just how that rich history of death rituals that's in New Orleans is something we so badly need now, because there is so much death happening around the virus. But that's a deep historical knowledge that is grounded in ritual, grounded in community, grounded in the diaspora, in all kinds. I mean, I don't even know that much about it, but it just is making me think, and I'm doing a lot of reading and reflecting about history, way way back, and looking at the ways that we've repeated cycles, and wanting to really imagine something that's different, that's sustainable, that reflects other values. And I'll leave it at that because I can't go on.
This is, I think, thank you for that transition. Is something, I think it's a remembering, but for me, it's also a reflection, right? This moment has been a lot of reading and a lot of research, and research about things that feel so obvious that we should know as Americans about our own history and our own legacy and who we are and what's built us, that have been covered and hidden and not shared. And so, I too am looking at those people like, why are we doing this again? Well, we're doing it again because we don't know that we ever did it before. And so we're thinking a lot about imagination and kind of thinking about how we start to visualize. I've been taken back by seeing several, comments on social media or in conversations of people who just are sort of in a moment where they can't imagine what life would be like if we didn't have this fighting in the streets or fighting with our government or fighting. And so I think it's a really crucial time for us to be kind of envisioning, and there's nobody better than our artists to do that. I can't hear you, Modesto.
I went and muted myself. Sorry about that. Glitch. No, but it's what we do, right? Artists, it's in our genes. I don't know how to better express it, but that we imagination. Without imagination, we wouldn't be what we are, right? We do what we do in order to question rather than answer, right? And I think right now we are in a huge time of questioning, right? And who better to lead and pose those questions than artists on all fronts? And again, that's why I immediately thought of everybody here, because we're not just visual artists, right? There's all these other little hats that we all wear. There's all these other outlets that we investigate, right? And specifically with what Chris has shown me through her own work and people she's put me in contact with, right? Just seeing how dancers and musicians and performers are dealing as well, and answer and pose questions. I understand the visual arts to a certain degree, and I always surround myself with a lot of visual artists as friends and collaborators. but what about those other the other arts, the other artists that are doing things that I have no true understanding. I want to know what they have to say. We need to hear everybody on what's going to happen. Dance and music is a whole different way of expression, but it can offer things that visual arts can't. So kind of went off on a tangent there, but that's sort of what we need to do, is kind of like keep moving forward with this and questioning and holding these kind of conversations. Yeah.
Do you, Constance or Ernest, have anything to add? Chris, I think you might have something to add. Just guessing.
We could just go on and on. But
Yeah.
I think I was just thinking about the distinctions that we make between the different disciplines of art and visual and dance and music, and just having actually a question of, how do we experience visual arts in the body? And I was remembering we did a site-specific exhibition that Ernest curated at an old building that was a former dentist office, and Modesto had a room in the space where he did an installation with his knitting, and I was, as you were talking about the piece in the entrance, which looked similar. I mean, there were other elements and all of that. The whole room was filled with knitting. That people did have this, can I touch it? And we're not sure, but really wanted to. And when we did the performances in the space, the dancers were given permission to touch it, and they were like all laying out and loving it. And I don't know, just this sort of cross-fertilization of the different forms. I think there is a way that visual is music and dance is visual and all of these various things.
Yeah, no, it was that particular, seeing the dancers interact with not just my piece, but the other pieces as well. It made me rethink like what I can do, right? What the possibilities are for my own work and in collaboration. And sometimes it's those unexpected things that kind of feed us a little bit more, right? And so I can never thank you enough for that, to both of you for that. So yeah, it has affected this work in a way, and it moves forward. So thank you all. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to add that I think that what Modesto's project does also is that it's online, that it's available to someone in New Orleans or someone in Houston, that there's a way to interact with the piece. There's isn't there, Modesto, please correct me, I think that is there an opportunity to call and to have, okay, so there's this wonderful interactive component that just brings us together. And so what I'm interested in is, what we're talking about is different disciplines working together. It's about communication, the common thread. And so how do we communicate across the nation? How do we bring artist voices together across great distances? And I think that there are just these conversations, there are virtual opportunities to do that, but I really am excited now that we're sort of being primed to work, towards this. So.
Yeah, it's a new way of thinking.
This is great. And, the five of us with Nathan are in California, and those conversations across the country are essential at this time. Yeah. We're all in one country together, and we've got our issues and we've got our own bubble. And so how we sort of move out of that. So Constance, it's nice to know you're here with us.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
From the southern states. Yeah, it's terrific.
Yeah, from Houston, which she finally got me to go out and visit. And I was scared to death, but I loved Houston. It was a remarkable city. It is a remarkable city. It's absolutely wonderful as an artist to be there and just to visit. Some of the friendliest people I've ever met. So, and some of the best sushi.
Who knew? Sushi is great here. But I will tell you that as a curator and as an artist, I always tend to live where I work. Modesto, you pointed that out. I really didn't think about it, but I do. So I always try to put myself in the community of where I'm working. And I'm so always amazed at what I see in the South in terms of the creative community in New Orleans, a place where artists survived Hurricane Katrina, and being dislocated, people who had to leave their environments and continue their work habits and their lives. And so the resilience here is really exciting and wonderful and inspiring. And I think for me as a curator, if I can communicate that in some way, whereas New Orleans is a big tourist town, people probably will not be coming. We hope that Mardi Gras might happen next year. The Jazz Festival, which is such an important part of keeping the culture alive in New Orleans. But we need to bring it out. And so, you know, that's sort of my goal is to bring people who won't come and who can't come. How do you keep artists and keep this invigorated in some way that people will understand what's happening, that there's something exciting happening.
Ernest, would you like to add anything?
Just in the conversation and talking about the multi-levels of artists, I have not, because I'm in that age group where the COVID is a concern. I've only gone to one protest, but if you think of the movement of the protesters, that those bodies in motion, and the chant, the sound that they're making, and the artists that are painting these incredible murals that are kind of the evidence that the protest is happening. That is how art transforms daily life. You know, that is for me. I'm not making because I'm seeing the world and you know, being present in this moment. And I think, you know, I would recommend anyone in any town where you know that there's been protest, if you can't join, to go see the murals that are being created, to go see the visual evidence of protest, and to see artists who are connecting it with the history of protest in this country. As Connie is talking about the South, I'm, you know, in my head, I'm realizing that the pandemic for African Americans, you know, originates in the South, and it's evident in a continual string for us, that is informed by our music, informed by our visuals, informed by our dance. And so that's actually, I didn't expect this to come out of this talk, but that is actually what just, you know, really is in my mind right now.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really great reminder. I have family, I grew up in Minneapolis, and so my family has been out to see the murals and out to see the memorials for George Floyd, and it's been really moving to see what the community has come together to put out, to remember the bodies lost, the people lost, and yeah, it's a powerful moment. Same holds true in San Jose, and around the city is just filled with murals and artwork. And I imagine you're seeing that in Houston as well, Connie?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, there's so much. And that's another thing that just shows me how important art is, and how that kind of communication, and is that all of these spontaneous artworks and you know, tributes, and how community, we're all trying to come together in some way and communicate. So, you know, I feel like what you're saying, Ernest, is so true. And I think, thank you for bringing that up, because that is something that is worth noticing, you know, wherever you are. And I like the idea too of having that, that again, I keep saying accessibility, but having these opportunities for people to see what artists are creating, what murals are happening, what's popping up spontaneously in other places in the nation.
So I told you an hour goes by really fast. Yeah, it's true. And we had one participant who raised their hand early on And I don't believe she's with us any longer. Nathan, is somebody named Nancy with us? I don't think so. So if there's any questions, and I don't see any, I'd like to share one more image with you all. Figure out how to move my screen. We're going to take you back to Idora Park projects for a moment. And then I'm going to try to move to this image. And I just want to share this image. It's an image of Montalvo's grounds. This is the base of our sort of great lawn. We've got that sort of perfect historic colonizer's mansion that was left to be a place for artists, and our artists push and push against that history and the environment in the 175 acres. And last summer we did a project entitled Threads, looking at sort of textile works and how they might represent humanity and the fragility of humanity. And this is a piece that, whoa, I did something. I'm trying to look at chat and too many things, my brain can't focus. So this is a piece that Modesto and Casey Rosenberg created as part of Rococo. And this is Forgiveness, the Misplaced Grace. And I'm gonna leave you with Chris Evans. I wanna thank Ernest, I wanna thank Constance, I wanna thank Modesto. Thank you all for being here today. And we're gonna let Chris close out our program.
Today's prayer. Father of Cups, the charred, devastated landscape of sickness, death, depletion, sooty concrete ruins of civilization, of empire, and the gray of twilight fog. Viruses attacking our lungs, liver, kidneys, in search of territory, seeking life and causing death. Ruins of organs. We walk through the ruins, carrying them in our lungs, hearts, kidneys, livers. The crumbling, releasing winds of grief, storms of rage, thunders of pain, tsunamis of longing, and finally, truth seeds. May we allow the crumbling, the dis-ease. May we sit with Babaluaye quietly, attentively. May we release and witness. May we sit for a time in the quiet of unknown. May we plant seeds of truth in the unknown and water them with love. May we grow structures of truths.
Thank you. Thank you all for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Until very soon. We all have a lot to follow up on.
Yes, yes, we do. Thank you all. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is
Thank you.
beautiful. Mwah.
Take care.